Hello, friends. Welcome back to Office Revenge Tales. Have you ever worked with someone who lied just to drag you down? Someone who whispered rumors until you felt the whole office looking at you differently? By the way, I'm curious. Where are you working these days? What kind of company or office do you spend your time in? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. Well, today's story is about a man who faced exactly that, and how the truth finally came crashing down on the colleague who thought lies could win. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoy real workplace stories with a twist. Now, let me take you into this tale. I had been at the company for over 12 years. Not the flashiest guy in the office, not the loudest either. But people knew me for one thing: steady work. The kind of employee who showed up, got the job done, and didn't play politics. That's why it stung so deeply when, out of nowhere, I noticed the whispers. Quiet conversations would hush when I walked by. Coworkers who once greeted me with warmth now offered tight smiles or avoided eye contact altogether. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe folks were just busy. Maybe I was imagining it. But then one morning, as I walked into the break room, I heard my name. Clear as day. My colleague Mark was speaking, his voice lowered, but not enough. He was telling two others that I had been cutting corners on reports, fudging numbers to make my department look better. My chest tightened. I wanted to storm in, confront him right there, but I held myself back. Instead, I stepped quietly, poured my coffee, and left as though I hadn't heard. Inside, though, the anger boiled. Mark had always been ambitious. Too ambitious. He wanted a management role that had recently opened up, and I knew he saw me as competition. But lies? Spreading rumors about me being dishonest with data? That cut to the core. In our line of work, your integrity was everything. The next weeks were miserable. The whispers grew louder. Someone even asked me, half joking, if I had cooked the books again. That was the moment I realized the rumors had spread beyond a few ears. They had infected the whole floor. I went home each night replaying conversations in my head, wondering who believed me, who doubted me. My wife saw the toll it was taking. She told me, "The truth always comes out. Just keep your head high." But deep down, I knew something had to be done. One day, my manager called me into his office. He closed the door and leaned forward, arms crossed. "I've been hearing some concerning things," he began. My stomach dropped. This was it. The lies were making their way up the chain. He questioned me gently but firmly. Had I been altering reports? Had I been misleading the team? I felt heat rise in my face, not from guilt but from outrage. I told him plainly, "No. I've never once compromised the integrity of my work." He listened but didn't commit. "We'll review some of the recent files," he said, "just to be thorough." That night, sitting at my kitchen table, I felt defeated. Years of hard work, years of building trust, shaken by one man's jealousy. But somewhere in that frustration, a resolve formed. If Mark wanted to play this game, I was going to make sure the truth came to light. Not by sinking to his level, but by letting facts and patience work in my favor. I started keeping copies of every report, every email, every communication tied to my work. I double-checked numbers, documented my steps, made sure everything was beyond reproach. And slowly, I noticed cracks forming in Mark's story. A slip here, an inconsistency there. I wasn't the only one paying attention anymore. Others began to question him too in small ways. And I knew this was just the beginning of his unraveling. The following weeks became a test of patience. Every day I walked into that office knowing the stares weren't the same. Some coworkers still treated me kindly, but others, you could see it in their eyes. Doubt, suspicion. I kept my head down, but inside I was watching, observing Mark. He grew bolder, almost smug, as though he could sense he had won. He'd make little comments during meetings, never directly naming me but hinting just enough. "We all know not everyone's reports have been 100% reliable," he'd say with a smirk. My fists clenched under the table. One afternoon, I stayed late, combing through project files. The building was nearly empty when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Mark. He looked surprised to see me still there. He gave a quick laugh. "Burning the midnight oil? Gotta make sure those numbers add up, huh?" His words dripped with venom. I forced a calm smile. "Yeah, I believe in double-checking everything," I replied. But inside, my anger solidified into something sharper. Determination. I knew I couldn't win this by out-talking him. Words were slippery. But facts, cold, hard data, Those couldn't be twisted forever. So I built a quiet case. Every report I submitted, I printed a copy, time-stamped, signed, and stored it. Every email exchange, I backed it up. And when I noticed odd gaps in Mark's own work, I saved those too. Missed numbers, mismatched figures, projects where his contributions didn't align with reality. Still, the rumors didn't slow down. If anything, they picked up speed. I overheard someone whisper that I was on the chopping block. It hurt, but it also steeled my resolve, because I knew the truth was coming. Then came the monthly review meeting. A big one. Executives from another branch were present. Each team had to present their results. I walked into the room with my binder of documents, prepared for anything. Mark went first. His presentation was polished, full of flashy graphs and confident words. He knew how to sell himself. But as he spoke, I recognized something. The numbers he was presenting, they didn't add up. He had pulled data from a report I had authored, but he had altered it, smoothed it out to make his department shine. My pulse quickened. This was it. When my turn came, I stood slowly, carrying my binder. I spoke with measured calm, explaining our division's results, and then I paused. "I'd like to address a matter that's been circulating," I said. The room went silent. Mark's face tightened. I pulled out a copy of my original report, the one Mark had altered. I projected it onto the screen. "Here are the numbers as submitted, time-stamped and recorded," I explained. Then I placed Mark's version beside it. The differences were undeniable. The executives leaned forward. Murmurs spread across the table. My manager's eyebrows shot up. And Mark, his face drained of color. "This," I continued, my voice steady, "is what I've been dealing with. My integrity questioned, my reputation attacked, all because someone has been spreading lies. But the truth, well, it's right here in black and white." The silence was heavy, but it wasn't against me anymore. It had shifted. All eyes turned to Mark. He stammered, tried to explain, but his words faltered. He had no ground left. My manager cleared his throat. "We'll need to discuss this further," he said firmly. But I could see it in his eyes. He knew where the truth lay. That night, as I left the office, I felt lighter for the first time in months. It wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. The lies that had poisoned my days were finally starting to wither under the weight of truth. And deep down, I knew Mark's downfall had only just begun. The days after that meeting felt different. For months, I had walked into the office with my shoulders heavy, carrying the weight of doubt and suspicion. But now, there was a shift. People looked at me differently. Some of those same coworkers who once avoided my gaze now nodded at me, offered a greeting, even small smiles. Word travels fast in an office. By the end of the week, nearly everyone knew what had happened, that Mark's numbers had been exposed as false, that the story he'd spun around me had cracked wide open. Still, Mark wasn't ready to give up. He walked around the office with forced confidence, laughing louder than usual, trying to brush it all off as a misunderstanding. "Just a mix-up in reports," he told anyone who would listen. Could have happened to anyone, but it hadn't happened to anyone else. It had happened to him. And deep down, everyone knew it. I stayed quiet, letting the truth speak for itself. But the company wasn't quiet. HR called both of us in for a formal review. Sitting across from Mark in that small conference room, I could see the nervous energy in his eyes, the way his hands tapped against the table. The HR manager began with a calm voice. "We've reviewed the submitted reports. We've compared timestamps, versions, and email trails. The evidence is clear." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of my reports, neatly aligned with email confirmations. "There's no indication of misconduct from your side," she said, looking at me. Relief flooded through me, though I kept my face steady. Then her gaze shifted to Mark. "But the discrepancies in your presentations raise serious concerns. Can you explain why your numbers do not match the originals?" Mark's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He muttered something about simplifying data for executives, about presentation style, but it didn't hold. His words were thin, flimsy, breaking apart under the weight of documented truth. After the meeting, whispers turned into conversations. People who once doubted me came by my desk, apologizing in small, awkward ways. "Hey, sorry for not checking in earlier," one colleague said. Another admitted, "I knew something didn't sound right, but I didn't know how to ask." I accepted their words politely, but a part of me remembered the isolation, the way silence had cut me deeper than the rumors themselves. As for Mark, his armor began to crack. He grew quieter, less boastful. Gone were the loud jokes in the break room, the smug comments in meetings. He sat further back, spoke less, avoided eye contact. It was as though the spotlight he had craved for so long had finally burned him. One Friday afternoon, I caught him standing alone by the copy machine. For the first time, he looked small, his shoulders slumped. He glanced at me, and there it was, the flicker of guilt, or maybe just fear. "You really made me look bad," he muttered under his breath. I paused, then replied calmly, "No, Mark, you did that to yourself." And I walked away. That weekend, I finally slept deeply. The knots in my stomach, the restless nights, the endless replaying of lies, all of it began to ease. The truth had found its way into the open, and it was spreading, just as the lies once had. Only this time, it carried weight. But deep down, I knew it wasn't finished. Offices have long memories, but companies also crave closure. Mark's reputation was damaged, but not yet decided. The question now was simple. Would he survive this storm, or would the company decide he had become too much of a liability? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The following Monday began like any other, but there was a tension in the air. Emails buzzed through the office with unusual frequency. Managers whispered behind closed doors, and HR scheduled follow-up discussions with key employees. It didn't take a genius to realize what was happening. Mark's actions were under a microscope. I tried to focus on my work, but the atmosphere was thick. Colleagues kept sneaking glances toward Mark's desk. He sat there stiffly, typing with a mechanical rhythm, his eyes darting to every shadow of movement. The swagger he once carried had evaporated. That afternoon, my manager stopped by my cubicle. His tone was calm, but firm. "Could you join us in the conference room at 2 o'clock?" he asked. I nodded, my pulse quickening. When I walked into the room, HR was there, along with 2 senior executives. Mark sat across from them, looking pale, his jaw tight. A thick folder sat in the middle of the table. The HR manager spoke first. "Mark, after a thorough review, we've concluded that you deliberately altered reports and misrepresented data. In doing so, you not only misled leadership but also damaged the professional reputation of your colleague." She nodded in my direction. The silence was heavy. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I was just trying to make the numbers easier to understand," he stammered. "Everyone tweaks reports for presentations, it's not a big deal." But the executives weren't buying it. One of them leaned forward, his expression hard. "There's a difference between simplifying data and falsifying it. What you did undermined trust. That cannot be overlooked." I sat quietly, hands folded, my heart pounding. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. Finally, the HR manager delivered the verdict. "Mark, your actions constitute a serious breach of company ethics. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated." The words hung in the air like a bell tolling. Mark's face went red, then drained of color. He looked around the room as if searching for someone, anyone, to defend him. But no one spoke. Not this time. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor, and muttered, "This isn't over." Then he stormed out, his footsteps echoing down the hall. When the door closed, the executives turned toward me. "We regret that you had to endure this," one of them said. "You've shown remarkable professionalism under difficult circumstances. Thank you for letting the truth come forward." I nodded, a quiet wave of relief washing over me. For the first time in months, I felt vindicated. News spread quickly, as it always does. By the next morning, everyone knew Mark was gone. The whispers this time weren't about me, they were about him. People spoke in hushed tones about how he'd sabotaged his own career, how ambition had blinded him. Coworkers stopped by my desk more often. Some offered supportive words, others simply patted my shoulder. And while part of me felt satisfaction, another part felt something more complicated. Because revenge, in the rawest sense, had been served. The man who tried to destroy me had been destroyed instead. Yet watching him pack his things into a cardboard box, I realized there was nothing glamorous about it. It was sad, pitiful even. Still, the truth was undeniable. His lies had finally collapsed, and the weight of them had buried only him. That evening, as I walked out of the office, the air felt lighter. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking up at the fading sky, and let out a long breath. The fight was over, or so I thought. Because in offices, stories don't just end, they echo. And sometimes the echoes carry lessons no one forgets. The week after Mark's departure was eerily calm. The office felt lighter, quieter, almost as if someone had turned down the static that had filled the air for months. For the first time in a long while, I could walk through the hallways without feeling the sting of suspicion in every glance. But even with Mark gone, the impact of his lies lingered. People avoided saying his name outright, but the story traveled in whispers, how he had tried to sabotage me, how the evidence had finally caught up with him. And inevitably, those whispers turned into reflections. If it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee in the break room, a younger colleague named Daniel approached me. He hesitated at first, then finally spoke. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I looked at him, puzzled. I believe some of the things Mark said, he admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. I didn't know what to think, and instead of asking you, I just went along with it. I'm sorry. I nodded slowly. It's hard to know what's true when someone spreads rumors, but thank you for telling me. Daniel seemed relieved, and I realized in that moment how much damage rumors could do, not just to me, but to the whole team. They corroded trust, made colleagues question one another, created cracks that weakened everything we built together. Over the following days, more coworkers came forward with similar words. Some apologized directly, others simply treated me with a newfound respect. Even my manager, who had questioned me weeks before, called me into his office. You handled this with dignity, he said. I know it wasn't easy, but the way you responded, not lashing out, not retaliating with more lies, well, it showed leadership. I didn't say much, but his words stayed with me. Leadership. That wasn't something I had been chasing. I'd only wanted fairness, the chance to do my work without a shadow hanging over me. But maybe, in facing this trial, I had proven something more. As the month went on, the company adjusted. New projects started, meetings resumed, deadlines loomed as always. On the surface, everything returned to normal. Yet beneath it, I sensed a shift. People spoke more carefully, thought twice before repeating gossip. There was a new awareness, an unspoken lesson carved into the office walls. And me? I learned too. I learned that lies, no matter how sharp, eventually dull against the grindstone of truth. I learned that patience, though painful, can outlast venom. And I learned that revenge doesn't always come from striking back. It sometimes comes from standing firm until the weight of integrity topples those who attack you. One Friday evening, as I packed up to head home, I glanced at Mark's old desk. Empty now, save for a faint outline where his nameplate once sat. For a moment, I thought about him, what had driven him to risk so much for ambition, and whether he regretted it now. Then I shook my head. That was his story to carry, not mine. As I walked out into the fading light, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. My colleagues knew the truth. My reputation had been restored, and though the scars of the experience would linger, they would serve as reminders. Reminders that truth has a way of shining through darkness. Reminders that even in the cutthroat politics of an office, character matters. And most of all, reminders that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply letting the truth speak for itself. And that, my friends, was how the truth finally came out. For months, lies had wrapped around me like chains, dragging my name through the mud. But in the end, those very lies collapsed under their own weight, leaving only the truth standing tall. It taught me something I'll never forget. In the workplace, ambition built on dishonesty always crumbles. Integrity may take longer to shine, but when it does, it lights the whole room. If you've ever faced office rumors or toxic coworkers, remember, you're not alone, and sometimes the best revenge is patience and proof. Thank you for listening to this story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me again here on Office Revenge Tales for the next twist-filled tale.